Hello guys, welcome back to the Seri Gaming channel. We're flying right back into today's episode where we will work on the ballroom that extends behind the zoo entrance and the neighboring square known as the Flamingo Plain in Dutch. This episode will be really time-lapse heavy as we are going to build this large building and the square in front of it. I'm really pleased with the end result, so be sure to stay tuned until the end of the episode. I promise it will be worth the wait. So the building we are creating here is part of the Elizabeth Center, a large complex of buildings which includes the Queen Elizabeth Hall, a concert hall. For our zoo we will be limiting ourselves to the facade that is visible from the Flamingo Square. At the spot where the ballroom sits today, there used to be a museum which housed the taxidermized animals which I mentioned in my previous video. But as part of the large expansion of the zoo in the 1890s, plans were made to construct the ballroom. The design of the building was made by a man named Emil Tielens, who designed lots of buildings for the zoo and will most likely be mentioned in future videos as well. The management of the zoo wanted to keep the ballroom for an exclusive audience, hence why the main facade does not face the square in front of the train station, but rather faces inwards towards the Flamingo Square inside the zoo itself. This is a recurrent theme, as for a long time the zoo was not intended for a broad audience. Animal gardens in the 19th century were very much intended for the bourgeoisie, who often also patronized geographical and zoological societies. The common man and woman from the street would be barred from entering the zoo even if they could afford the entry fee. It was only through school field trips that the zoo would gradually open its doors to the wider public, resulting in a democratization of the zoo. During both World Wars, the concert hall was used as a field hospital, but after the Second World War, the building had sustained so much damage that it was decided to completely renew the concert hall in the 1950s and 60s. As a result, the facade of the building facing the zoo now looks like it is detached from the larger complex behind it. Speaking about the World Wars, this brings me to an interesting question. What happened to the Antwerp Zoo during wartime? Belgium was invaded in both World Wars, and in both World Wars, Antwerp was occupied and sustained heavy damage. In the First World War, the first zeppelin of many appeared above Antwerp in September of 1914. The management of the zoo did not wait to take action and moved the large carnivores such as bears, lions and tigers in the basement beneath their enclosures. In October 1914, these carnivores, but also the poisonous snakes, were unfortunately shot and killed. As the war continued, the zoo also had to kill its large herbivores as feeding them had become too costly, and the people of Antwerp could really use a buffalo or antelope steak on their plates. The zoo also had another problem. Because it was right next to the Antwerp Central Station, it was often the target of bombings, resulting in severe damage to multiple buildings. So after the war was over, the zoo not only had to replace the animals they had killed, but also repair the buildings that had been bombed. Only for a new war to arrive in Belgium 20 years later. In between the two world wars, the zoo received a lot of animals from the Belgian Congo to compensate for the losses between 1914 and 1918. But when Germany invaded Belgium again in 1940, it was like 1914 all over again. Large carnivores had to be killed, and the zoo became the target of bombardments aimed at the Antwerp Central Station. Near the end of the war, members of the Belgian resistance, known as the White Brigade, turned the Antwerp Zoo into their headquarters. Collaborators and German prisoners would even be locked up in the zoo's animal cages. In November of 1944, the British Army took over the zoo and turned it into a military base for their soldiers. The ballroom even became a dancing for the British soldiers looking for some relief. During the Second World War, the zoo sustained even more damage than in the first one. Luckily, the Belgian state took on the costs for the reparations after the war was over. At this point in the video, I would like to discuss where you can find great visual sources on the zoo's history. You probably can find a lot with a simple Google search, but what I have found to be an absolute treasure is the image database of the KMDA, the Royal Zoological Society of Antwerp, which manages the zoo. I'll put a card on the screen and try to remember to put a link in the description below. Their collection not only contains visual sources of all the different exhibits and the buildings in the zoo, but also of major events such as the World Wars, or even minor occasions such as the penguins having a walk in the snow. They even have old postcards and advertisements for the zoo. For those interested in colonial history, there's even some pictures of the Okapis in Congo. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, feel free to pause the video and check out the link below. Now back to some more history. Earlier I talked about how the zoo got into difficult times during both World Wars. But during the First World War, Michel Lust, then director of the zoo, found a solution to deal with the financial troubles that had come with the war. While the concert hall had previously been used by the Belgian army as a field hospital, after the Germans occupied Antwerp and the front moved to Ypres, the concert hall had become empty again. So that gave the director of the zoo the ideal opportunity to turn the hall into a movie theater. Of course, the German occupiers had to approve which movies were shown, meaning no British or American movies were shown. But still, the movie theater was able to turn away financial disaster for the zoo by providing a steady income from moviegoers. Scenic Zoologie was born. Movies were shown with a live orchestra, not unusual during the era of the silent movie. In 1930, Scenic Zoologie started showing sound films, but by the end of the 1930s, competition from neighboring movie theaters was so high that the management of the zoo decided to stop showing movies. At this point in the time-lapse, I am building the winter garden that's attached to the main ballroom building. The winter garden was intended as a spot where ball attendees could rest in a romantic atmosphere. As you can see, I used a lot of these glass walls, and the roof is also completely made of glass. All these glass elements made the winter garden very vulnerable during both World Wars, and after the Second World War the building was quoted as one of the most damaged in the zoo. Today the winter garden houses butterflies from Malaysia and Costa Rica. I debated doing an interior for this building, but eventually decided that it would be really difficult to make it look good because of all the intersecting walls and whatnot. I might return to it later though to see what's possible. As you can see here, this is one of the glass heavy buildings that is part of the winter garden. Was really hard to get these elements in without them showing through the pillars, so I had to move the pillars out a bit from what it initially was. Then I also added some black plaster walls behind there to give the appearance that there's something inside, but you can't really see it. Might delete those later on when I decide to, or if I decide to make an interior for this building. And but the tactic really doesn't really hold up when you go to the roof of those buildings, because there's no curved black plaster things you can use as a roof. And I'm using these curved roof tiles here, so you can, if you look on top, you can just see through and see that there's nothing inside. And the same here, I tried using some black plaster elements in this building, the larger part of the winter garden, but they just moved, they just collided with everything, and I just decided to remove them and move on. So yeah, you can see me here using those black things, trying it out, but I just removed them, continued with the glass. There's a lot of glass in this building, as you can see, which is why I said earlier that it was really damaged. And I moved on to the back side of this building here, completed the roof, completed the walls behind it, so there's not a big hole gaping through. Then I had some issues here because it's at an angle, this building, so this roof is a bit wonky. Then I moved on to the stairs in front of the building. There's this big central staircase in the middle, which I just made by using the same ground tiles, moving them down, moving them one forward, and just continuing until I hit the ground, move them a bit back. Then there's this smaller one on the right, which I show right now, I think. Yeah, right now, which is a bit steeper. And there's an even smaller one on the left, which I decided to do with separate elements so I could make it really steep, as you can see there. Then it was time to continue the path and run it along the building. I initially thought it would be cool to have the people go up there, walk along the gallery, but I eventually deleted those because the stairs really didn't work with the stairs I built, so I just deleted the entire thing, remade the path, and I started continuing onto the Flamingo Square, which I'll talk about a bit now. So in 2016, the Flamingo Square was officially named and opened to the public by the mayor of Antwerp, Bart de Wever. Before that, the square was part of the zoo, and so you had to pay the entry fee to go onto the square. In 2016, the zoo decided to move the entrance back from the spot which we built in the previous episode. As a result, the Flamingo Square can be visited without having to pay the entry fee to the zoo. We will talk about this a bit more in the next episode, but as part of the new plan, the Flamingo restaurant was also completely retouched. As you can see now, I also decided to add the entrances to the entrance of the zoo, actually, so where the information guy would enter. I extended the square and I tried to measure to get the angle right, but I don't think I got the angle right, but I don't think it will be that impactful. So I tried to get a different color for the center of the square here, and decided to settle with this color, which I think really contrasts nicely with the other more sandy color. I added some nice lighting, and of course the trees needed some little tweaks. While adding the paths here, I added some benches and decided to go with green benches eventually. They were a real pain in the ass to add because the paths don't always line up perfectly, but yeah, adding those paths really makes me look forward to seeing people walk and sit on the benches and stuff. Just walk across the square sitting on a bench. You can already imagine them sitting there. So at this point we were almost done with the center pieces of the square, but there was one more important thing that needed, or actually two more important things that needed to be added, and those are these little kiosks or ticket booths. I initially messed up the angle there, but I fixed it really quickly. These little octagons turned out really well, and so you have two of these ticket booths sitting on the square. And then there's also this I don't know how you would call it, but this like circular building as well, which is also quite a recent addition to the zoo. They all turned out really well. So yeah, this ticket booth, I added a custom sign here that says tickets, and then I just moved it in its spot, copied it, and moved the other one. Then I moved on to the circular building I was talking earlier about. It's in fact a gazebo, and it's a recent. I said it was a recent addition to the zoo, but it was actually built in 1947, just after the Second World War. The gazebo is primarily used, I think, for music performances, like outdoors music performances. Like, just imagine there's probably dozens of movies where they use these kinds of gazebos for like little fanfares and stuff like that, or a little orchestra playing. So I just moved it at its spot, and then I tried to build this dirt ring around it, which I later replaced with flowers because those just look nicer. The flowers took some tweaking to put in the right spot, but I think eventually I got them right where they needed to be. And then I moved on to the actual entrance of the zoo, so the actual place where you put in your ticket in a scanner and you go through the entrance gate. It's just a small modern type of building. It's not even a building per se, it's more like something like overhanging, but yeah, it has these fences running all along just to keep people from entering the zoo without having a ticket. And it took some tweaking and adjusting to get these gates right. Then there's just this small little, I wouldn't even say building, but yeah, like hut, not even a hut, like a ticket booth or where someone would sit and actually take or look if you have the right ticket and stuff like that, if it's not already automized and stuff like that, or automated I should say. And I just adjusted this to match up, and that's it. So all that was left to do in this episode was just continue running the fence along there to connect to the little gazebo. I think I had to move the gazebo actually, and then just matched up the fences there. Continued tweaking the terrain and stuff like that, because the terrain was a bit messed up, and then it's actually done. So let's head on to the game and have an actual look at it. So we're now live inside of the game, and let me just go on the, let's just hide the GUI for a bit. So this was the entrance we built in the last episode. In between episodes, so in between this episode and the next one, I will tweak these little frescoes here, because I found out there's actually images of lions and tigers inside of the game, or assets of them at least. So I'll use that. The deer, which I called the stag in the previous episode, will still remain here, as will the penguin and the dodo. Yeah, looking at this, it really looks nice with the finished roofs and stuff. Then we have the Flamingo Square here, where we have the two ticket booths here, and a nice little building on the left hand side with the beautiful staircases over here. I really like how the shadow plays into everything. And we have the winter garden here. I think I might have to place some plants over here. But yeah, this winter garden, I might go and do some interior here. I removed this wall as well, so to allow for some interior here. But yeah, as you can see, these walls like intersecting here might cause a bit of an issue. Yeah, because I can't move them at all, so that might be a bit of an issue. Also, there's a question of where is the entrance to this. It's a bit hard to find out through Google Maps and Google Street View and stuff like that. Then we have our little entrance here and our little gazebo, and then in the next episode we will build basically the flamingo enclosure, which is right about here, and the flamingo restaurant, which is right about here. And then there's in between those there's a path running with the actual exit of the zoo. So here's the entrance, and then they go along the entire park, and the exit is then right here. So yeah, that will be for the next episode. So you have the flamingo enclosure to look forward to. I will leave you with some scenery or some scenic shots, and then the end title screen. See you in the next episode. Bye!